Boker Tov on this fine Sunday morning, and always special for me to be able to share words of Torah and thoughts with my friends over here, and Yasher Koach for giving me that opportunity to use the language of the Talmud that yoter, more than the wealthy or giving person does to the recipient gives to the person that is giving. So, Yasher Koach, and thank you. And I deeply do appreciate it. So, I want to first give a disclaimer. But before I do the disclaimer, I want to say the bracha, as we always do. Please, if you have your own coffee, make your own bracha. If not, you can answer Amen. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shahakol Niyah Bidvaro. Hope you can hear me. If you don't hear me well, please let me know. And we always start with the mitzvah of tzedakah. So you could join me in putting in a couple of coins into the tzedakah pushka. And as I always say, so that Hashem, God Almighty, gives us blessing today, both me I as the lecturer, you as the listener, that we should have success and find the right words to inspire both of us. So, today's discussion is based on a letter of the Rebbe. I have Lekutei Sichos over here. I have a letter of the Rebbe printed over here. I'm going to actually read the letter and translate, and we're going to take the letter apart. We're going to analyze the letter and apply it to today's discussion. And as I said, I want to give a disclaimer. This topic, should schools accept difficult children, and I put difficult in quotation marks because, who's to, and how do you determine which child is difficult and so on. And on the other hand, which child is not difficult? Every one of us have certain areas of difficulty and challenges. But I also, even more importantly, want to say I don't teach. I'm not a teacher in terms of a teacher in school. I don't run a school. I have taught, and I have taught in yeshiva, and I have taught in school. And my wife, as many of you know, is a celebrated teacher for many, many years. I think close to 40 years, I think she's been teaching. And she's an amazing teacher. Just a little shout out to my wife, who doesn't like public appreciation, but nevertheless, because this past week, I got a recording from someone who just said wonderful things about my wife's teaching. So, Yasher Koach to that person, Yasher Koach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God Almighty, for giving her the opportunity to impact so many kinderlach, so many wonderful children. But I'm not in the world of education, in the world of adult education, but not in the world really of children education. And so when I ask the question on today's topic class, should schools reject difficult children, it is also in connection with requests that I get. I get from time to time asking from either schools or from parents, either way, to get involved in trying to work things out sometimes with perhaps a challenging parent, a challenging child, a school that's being difficult, and we try to help. And this is not in any way to be judgmental, because there's a lot of nuances, a lot of difficulties, a lot of unique individual situations. So this is more a general discussion, and take it as such. And you're welcome to give feedback, of course, and we'll take it from there. So I want to read this letter. So this is a letter that the Rebbe wrote Yom Hei Ches L'Chodesh Iyar, because of this past week's Torah portion, Emor, Parashat Em, that we just read. This letter was written during the month of Chodesh Iyar, which we are in right now. And the Rebbe says like this, Shalom Abracha, this letter was written in Tafshin Gimel Hey, which means in Tafshin Ches. This letter was written in 1948. Goes back quite a while. And the Rebbe says, Shalom Abracha, peace and blessing, Al Derech HaTzachus, on a little bit of a lighter side. In other words, the Rebbe is acknowledging that this that he's about to write is not necessarily the straightforward meaning of what he's about to say in understanding or drawing a lesson from these different places in Torah, as we'll see in a moment. But nevertheless, even when a tzaddik, a rebbe, a holy man says something al derech hatzachos on the lighter side, it also has depth and meaning and lesson and guidance. So, B'Pasha Shavua Zeh, in this week's Torah portion, it says, Amor v'amarta. This week's Torah portion says the expression Emor ve'amarta, say, you should say. It says a double expression of you shall say or you shall tell. Lahazu Gedolim Malaktanim, to come and give azhara, or give instruction, give direction to the adult upon the children. And let me explain. So this week's Torah portion begins with the laws, where God says to Moses to speak to the Kohanim about the laws of ritual impurity. The simplest case of ritual impurity is if a Kohen comes in contact with a deceased, with a corpse, with a deceased person, and that imparts ritual impurity, and a Kohen is forbidden to become ritual impure, and it has its application even today. A Kohen is not allowed to go to a cemetery, meaning he cannot be within Daled Amot, he cannot be within a certain amount of space next to a grave. He's not allowed to be in a ohel, in a tent, in a home where there is a deceased person lying over there, and that is part of the laws of Tumah V'Tara, of ritual impurity and how to become pure and so on. And that, in this week's Torah portion, is where the Torah addresses the Kohanim about these laws of ritual impurity. And the Torah here says that it's not only a directive to the adults also have to educate and tell their children, the Ketanim, the young ones, that they also have to be careful with the laws of Tumah. Okay, so that is the background, that's the story. Now, the Rebbe continues over here, Begimel Mekomos, there are 3 places where the Torah specifically tells the adults that you have to pay attention to go ahead and also tell the children. Essentially, all mitzvahs, all commandments, we have to educate our children. But here the Torah goes out of its way to add either a statement, a verse, a directive, to tell us that Gedolim, the adults, the big ones, have to go ahead and be careful and make sure that the children are also instructed and careful with this particular mitzvah or prohibition. And so the Rebbe in this letter comes to learn why specifically in these 3 instances does the Torah tell us this. So here he goes. The Gimel Mekayim, this is taken from Tractate Yevamot. Baz HaTorah lahazu gedolim alaktanim. In 3 places we have this expression that, or this directive that gedolim should be, the gedolim, the adults, the older ones, should guide, instruct, and the younger ones. What are the 3 places? So he lists them. Vehem. One place is when it comes to dam, the prohibition of eating or drinking blood. I say eating because the Torah uses the term lo sochlu rather than lo sishtu. Do not eat blood. And another place, number 2, is when it comes to shkotzim, which means insects. It's forbidden, it's treif, it's not kosher to eat insects, bugs, which is why today when you get vegetables and so on, you have to check for bugs. It's a biblical prohibition to have bugs. And there too, the Torah makes a point to tell us that the Gedolim, the Torah goes ahead and uses an expression that indicates that the Gedolim should also instruct the Ketanim. Okay? And in our portion, what we're learning now is Tumas Kohanim when it comes to the laws of Tumah and Tara. So, why in these 3 places? Why specifically these 3 places? So here the Rebbe says, as he began, al derech hatzachos, he says, why these 3 places? So he says the following. He says, dam, why blood? Because we're talking about the Jews who went out of Egypt. And he says that the culture of that time says, the Talmud, shahayushtufim bedam. The Talmud says, and Rashi brings it in his commentary, that they were actually addicted. Blood was a thing. Blood was an addiction. It was an attraction. It was some sort of delicacy or some sort of desired drink. or maybe limbs that were saturated with blood, whatever it is. So why does the Torah tell us over here? Sorry for that brief interruption. Why does the Torah tell us over here that you should teach the children when it comes to dam? Because a teacher, an educator might think that what is the point of me trying to guide this child? He's addicted. It's something that is so difficult and so attached. The child is so attached. The educatee is so attached to this that I'm trying to teach them. It's just a waste of time. And what's the point? Therefore, the Torah tells us when it comes to dam, you should go ahead and make sure, don't give up. Go ahead and tell and guide the child. Shkotzim, bugs, is the other way around, says the Rebbe. The Gemara tells us that bugs. Why would the Torah have to tell us that a person is forbidden from eating bugs? The Talmud uses the expression, a person is disgusted from eating insects and so on. And why would a person be eating insects? Is purely out of rebellion to the Almighty, to God. So here, by way of example, we're dealing with the rebellious child, or what we titled the difficult child. The rebellious child, the child that whatever the teacher is trying to do, the parent is trying to do, they will do specifically to try to sort of anger, disobey the educator. Here too, you might think, what's the point? Why should I get involved? There's no hope. Says the Torah, no, lahazu gedolim alaktanim. The gedolim have to go ahead. The adults, the teacher, the educator, the parent has to. And if the Torah says you have to, that means you can penetrate, you can have success. The gedolim alaktanim, on the young ones. And finally, tumas kohanim. Tumas kohanim represents the laws of ritual impurity. Ritual impurity has no logic to it. It's not like you're going to take some sort of magnifying glass and you're going to take apart that which became impure and you're going to see some sort of bacteria, some sort of disease or so on. You won't see anything. It's totally what is referred to as a gzeirus hakosov. It's something that it's a decree by the Almighty. It has no rational, it has no logic to it. And over here, you might think to yourself on two levels. Number one, I'm not going to teach the child things that are based on faith, things that are not rational. Stories of the tzaddikim, of our great righteous holy men, stories of miracles about the 10 plagues. These are too fantastic. This is not rational. It's not logical, to the extent that sometimes even the teacher himself or the parent struggles with some of these concepts. And when the teacher struggles, the child feels it, that they're not sort of genuine, they're not fully there. And therefore, perhaps those things I should skip. I shouldn't educate my child. Comes the Torah and says that no, in all these three instances, it's important for you to remember, lahazir gedolim alaktanim, that the adult, the teacher, has to be persistent, has to be dedicated, and using the following words of the Rebbe, I'll say it in Hebrew and then I translate, the L'chein is here at Torah. It's therefore by these three things that the Torah warns us, encourages us, that we should not give up. V'chol echad mi Yisrael, every single one of us, no matter in which category we fall, whether we are the rebellious child, whether we are, and by the way, as often, and here in this letter too, the Rebbe says a child could also mean not only a child in years, but a child in attitude, a child in their growth, in their place of where their growth in Torah and Judaism is. So a person might say, so here it says Yim, whoever it might be, we are instructed, commanded, encouraged, given strength to do whatever we can to put the student, the student on the foundation of truth, and to awaken within him the inner soul, the inner Jewish neshama that he has, and especially when we're dealing with young children, that they are very much sort of malleable malleable, and the teacher can have tremendous impact upon them. So let me. This is an amazing letter. I want to elaborate on this letter a little bit, and maybe a story or two, and that will be our discussion for today. And especially that Lag BaOmer is tomorrow night. Lag BaOmer is the period of time that the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, talk about teacher and student. They died sadly during a plague during this period of time, as mentioned last week, which is why it's a time of mourning. And they stopped the plague and they stopped dying. And then Rabbi Akiva had 5 remaining famous students, that from those 5 students, the Torah was rebuilt. Until today, we have Torah because of those 5 students. So it highlights Rabbi Akiva, the amazing thing, the amazing lesson from this story, in addition to other beautiful lessons that are told about Lag BaOmer, is Rabbi Akiva could have had every right to give up on his students. After 24,000 of his students died, he could have said, okay, I retire, I go home. I must have done something wrong. But no, he persisted with love. And he was successful, that we have Torah today because of Rabbi Akiva's, rather than giving up, he said no, as the letter says over there, keep at it with love. He had the 5 students that from these 5 students, we have Torah today. So it's very much in connection, this discussion, with Lag BaOmer that we will be celebrating tomorrow night, and everybody's welcome to come. The community event is on Tuesday evening. Please do join us together with your Kinderlach and family and so on. Now, so basically, in this letter, the Rebbe is identifying, based on these 3 areas where Torah commands us, specifically Lahazu Gedolim Alaktanim, that the adults should make sure to guide, to instruct the Ktanim. The Rebbe tells us 3 areas that is very common for a teacher, educator, and again, adults, even to other adults, but one is considered a child in terms of their knowledge. But more directly and specifically, when we're talking about adults, literally, teachers, parents, and their children, students in class, there are 3 areas of challenge that is common to address. The first area is the law that the Rebbe mentions, which is the law of dam, blood. And blood represents an area where the child is very attached to something other than the guidance and the teachings of the teacher, be it outside influences, be it social media, be it that the child is just not interested, and the reason he's not interested often is, or she is not interested often is because she's just attracted to other things, the attractions of the day, and comes to school, comes to class, and just doesn't, whatever the teacher tries to do, just doesn't connect. So there's no question that's a challenge. That's a challenge for the teacher. The child is distracted. Why is the child distracted? The child is just not interested. How often do we hear that from teachers that are teaching our children? The child is just not interested. Or you have the rebellious child, the child who is like, the Torah says, shkatzim, when it comes to the only reason why the Torah tells us he shouldn't eat insects is because it's a rebellious child. The child is just hard to discipline. The child is rebellious. The child acts up. The child causes others to act up. I can't. Finished. And then we have, as I mentioned, and then we have the child, the issue with the teacher, is dealing with subject matter, which is like the laws of ritual impurity. And I want to say that within here, I want to sort of go in 2 directions. Sometimes you have where the teacher who's teaching genuinely struggles or doesn't even want to believe what they're teaching. Let me highlight this point with a story. There's a story told with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the 6th Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yofi Yitzchak of Shneerson. When he was a youngster, he was an only child by his father, the Rebbe Rashab, who was the 5th Chabad Rebbe. And that the Rebbe Rashab was interviewing various Hasidim to teach the future Rebbes, and he was very particular that it should be the right person. And a teacher is not someone who just imparts knowledge. A teacher is one who shapes character. A teacher is one who instills yirat shamayim, fear of heaven. And the Rebbe Rashab was interviewing a particular chassid, and the Rebbe Rashab refused hiring this particular chassid, even though he was a fine man. But the Rebbe Rashab basically, and he was honest with the fellow, he says, I don't feel that you really exemplify, are a role model, or really internalize some of the things that I want you to teach my child. I don't think that you really, I guess at the level that the Rebbe Rashab expected, that it's something that you're fully in sync with, or fully absorbed and on board with. So the chassid responded to the Rebbe Rashab, and he said, okay, your assessment is correct, but I will still tell the previous Rebbe, regardless of my inner, where I'm holding internally, I will tell him all the right things. I will teach him without distortion, without coaching in a way that is my maybe watered down way of thinking, and so on. So the Rebbe Rashab responded to him in the following way. He said to him, look, I don't want that my child should grow up to also tell others what's right, but he himself will not be that which he teaches. So what the Rebbe Rashab was saying is that where a teacher is genuine and true, that imparts, that rubs off, that is sensed and felt in the neshama, in the core of the child. I know in the 1940s, when the previous Rebbe later came here to the United States, the previous Rebbe put in a lot of effort to send Chabad young men to many of the Hebrew schools. And one of the reasons the Friedrich Rebbe said was that in many of these schools there were people who were teaching who did not keep Shabbat, who did not keep kosher. And Friedrich Rebbe said, what do you expect? How are you going to educate a generation of the next Jewish nation? How are you going to educate a generation with teachers who don't themselves believe and practice that which they teach? Yes, they am telling them the Torah or whatever it might be as some sort of subject, as some sort of topic, like we talk about Greek mythology. But if they themselves don't believe it and live it, they're not going to shape these children to be the proper God-fearing and God-loving Jews that is needed in a time when there are so much challenges to those values in the outside world. And that's why he made a strong effort. And that was the seeds of transforming the United States and the Chabad movement of reaching out and bringing the authentic, true beauty of Judaism to our fellow men and women throughout the country and throughout the world. So this is, part of the explaining the letter. Now, I want to share a little bit my thoughts. I said right away that a disclaimer: I'm not an educator. I'm not a teacher. I've been out of the classroom for many, many years. So my thoughts are just my personal thoughts. You could agree, you could disagree. But again, just this last week, I dealt with, with a child, with a family that wanted to, that was dealing with their child, and without getting into details, just for the privacy of the matter. But this is not new. This happens all the time. Schools sometimes accept children that are in, putting it in these three categories, don't want to accept that which is maybe more traditional, fantastic. Those have degrees, meaning for one child, hearing about the 10 plagues is a given. It's wonderful. For another child, they struggle with that. If you teach them about honoring your father and mother, okay, that's fine. It's rational, makes sense. You teach them about the laws of kosher, they struggle with that. For them, that is more relegated to the area of a faith than the area of rational understanding. Every child is different, students are different, and so on. But I want to give a couple of just personal thoughts on what guides me, in a sense, when I work and try to be of help to parents, because it's very difficult. It's very difficult. I mean, I myself had children. It's very difficult. Every child is different, and children are amongst my children. I've had, I joke about one of my kids that they were my youngest teenager, and I joke about another one of my children. They were my oldest teenager. It took them more years to get out of their teenage years and become an adult and grow up into being a fine young man or woman. So that's the way it is. That's the way it is. The Talmud says, "Ein de yasein shavis." Their minds, their personalities, their character are just not the same. No two human beings are the same. So when we talk about educating our children, is a school obligated to educate our difficult children? Now, if you read the letter here from the Rebbe, the answer would be 100% yes. It's one of our kinderlach, it's one of our children, especially if it's a child from within the community, as opposed to maybe a child from a different community or an outside community wants to come to your school. But I want to say like this. Today, we are also blessed that there's many different schools that cater to the needs of and the personality and character and interests of different children. So both parents and teachers, educators, have to be on board with this. There's no question that sometimes putting a child into an environment, into a certain system that doesn't suit or fit in keeping their interests, in having them engaged, in helping them grow and making sure they feel good about themselves, is you're actually harming the child, and you're harming the other students. So first, again, today we are at a time where we are blessed that there are definitely an option of schools that their curriculum, their program, their teachers are set up in a way that they are able to educate different children, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. In the Haggadah we have Keneged Arba Banim Dibra Torah. The Torah talks to 4 different types of children. There's the Chacham, there's the Rasha, there's the Tamsh, and the Elishal. So when you are deciding, I can tell you like this, with my own children, at least in the older age, in the older stage, they didn't go to the same schools. They went to different schools based on my assessment of where they would blossom and what would be best for them and so on, rather than sort of forcing them into a certain environment or a certain place which wouldn't be best for them. So that is something that you have to take into account. At the same time, I would also say that in a community setting, and the strength of our strength is the strength of our community, you have to look out for each other, which means, and I could say that some of the schools, and this is sort of a shout out for some of the schools locally, that when they unfortunately assess that this child, if we would have this child in our school, the child will not be beneficial for the child. In fact, it'll be detrimental to the child. They don't just reject the child and say, "Not my problem." No, they go out of their way to find and to put an effort to find a match for that child. So here, I would say it works both ways. And again, this is a personal opinion based on the Rebbe's letter and the parsha about G'dolim Alaktanim. There are times where schools, educators have to go sort of out of their comfort zone and say, "This child is my responsibility." We have to be determined. We have to be persistent. We have to give love. And if we make that assessment, have I given them? We once had here Rabbi Yisrael Engel of blessed memory, he was also a teacher. I don't know, 50, 60 years of his life he taught. And he had a little discussion, a little talk over here at Chabad Coral Springs. And he said a teacher that walks into a classroom and doesn't love every single child has no business being in that classroom. Love, care, dedicated. So if that child is in your class and they're struggling based on the 3 areas we just identified from the Rebbe's letter, then we are told, you keep on being persistent, you keep on showing care, you keep on showing love, and you will be successful. And the concept that I want a school or a classroom that's only for children that are sort of problem-free is not the Jewish way. It's just not the Jewish way. Especially not a community school. It's not the Jewish way. It's not the Chabad way. It's not the Hasidic way. It's not the Torah way. On the other hand, parents, today you have other choices. You have other choices. And you have to truly assess, are you doing a child a favor by putting him in but let's present it in the more positive. Can I give this child a much better chance for a good education, shaping of character, growth, spiritual growth, character growth, by looking into a particular school that would be best for he or she? Then you have an obligation to do so. That's part of the persistence. That's part of the love. Don't put a square into a round shape and so on. So this is my thoughts on the matter. You're welcome to give me your reaction, to give me your comments. I'd be glad to listen. And that's that. The bottom line is that the child, the child being educated, has to know and feel that it's all coming not from a place of love, a place of care. That's usually what brings about the best results. So that's that. And as the letter finishes off with that approach, we will certainly be successful to raise the next generation. The most important thing we could do is dedicate time to our children, to our students, to show appreciation to our teachers. That's the greatest gift that we have is our kinderlach and our educators. So may we have success with that, as Rabbi Akiva did, despite a tremendous setback. And thank you for listening. Thank you for listening, and may you continue to share these words of Torah. I would say, let us also merit the time of the coming of Mashiach, where it says that one will not have to teach the other, because all will know me and God. And may we merit speedily to that time. Everybody have a fantastic, wonderful week.